Welcome back, everyone. Today is a bit of a somber occasion, I guess you could say. We're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of the earthquakes that hit Nepal back in 2015.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at some of the after effects. We're going to be referencing an article by David Ways, who, writes these Nepal guidebooks. And he was actually there when the earthquakes hit. It's quite an experience to read about. He talks about seeing the destruction firsthand. The Durbar squares were just totally wrecked. Temples were just leaning over like they were about to collapse, and just dust everywhere in Bhaktapur.
Really paints a picture.
It does, yeah. So, it's been a decade since these earthquakes hit, and we wanted to really kind of dig into, like, what's the state of recovery right now?
Right.
And, what happened to all that international aid that was pledged?
Yeah. I mean, that's the big question, right? Like right after the quakes, the whole world just came together. It was amazing. Something like $4.1 billion was pledged by different countries and organizations.
Wow, 4.1 billion.
It was huge. And it wasn't just governments, People all over felt moved to help. Like India, they pledged billions of rupees. Japan stepped up for some heritage restoration projects. Even gamers, the Destiny community online, they raised like $1 million.
Really? That's amazing.
It was incredible, yeah. The U.S. also pledged a good amount, $130 million through USAI and the State Department.
Wow. So that money was meant for like immediate relief, food and water and shelter, but also for the longer term rebuilding.
Exactly, yeah.
Both. That's amazing, really. So much generosity. But, thinking about that $4 billion,
Yeah.
Waze talks about walking around Nepal today, and you don't always see the results of all that money.
Yeah.
Some areas have recovered. We'll talk about that. But some places, it's like they're still stuck in 2015.
Right. It makes you wonder, where did all that money go? Why isn't the recovery more obvious everywhere?
Yeah, that's the question.
So that takes us to how all this aid is actually managed and distributed.
Right.
And the key is, or should be, transparency and accountability. So the Nepali government set up this thing called the National Reconstruction Authority, the NRA. Their job was to basically run the whole rebuilding effort, manage all the money that was pledged. Initially, they estimated that they would need $6.7 billion for everything.
Wow.
So they were already short, even with the pledges. But the really concerning thing is this year, the NRA said only about half of the pledged money has actually been spent.
Wow.
And lots of projects, important ones, are either unfinished or totally stalled.
That's a real problem. And actually, it seems like this slow progress, this lack of transparency, it's not exactly news, right? I mean, back in 2018, there was that investigation by the Kathmandu Post
Oh, yeah.
that found that by 2017, only like 60% of the pledged money had even been handed out.
Right.
And that's just getting the money to Nepal. What Waze points out is how hard it is to track where it actually ended up.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of reasons why things have been so slow and opaque.
Yeah.
Like with the Nepali government, there was a lot of bureaucracy.
Oh, I can.
And then political gridlock delayed the NRA from even starting work for months.
Oh, wow.
So once they got going, there was just tons of red tape. And then you had instances of local corruption and just general inefficiency. The scale of the disaster was just huge. And reaching remote communities was also a big logistical challenge. But I think one of the biggest issues was how the NRA was structured. It was very decentralized.
Okay.
So you had different government ministries all kind of stepping on each other's toes. Like they had overlapping jurisdictions, which would hold up project approvals for months.
Oh, wow.
Essentially, the money just wasn't flowing.
And then you had all the NGOs, right, all these non-governmental organizations involved in relief and rebuilding.
Yeah, you had a mix there. Some were fantastic, no question. But their effectiveness was all over the place.
Really?
We actually mentioned seeing these poorly built shelters put up by aid organizations. That couldn't even last one monsoon season. And there were concerns about the overhead costs of some of the big international NGOs.
Right.
Like maybe too much money was going to administration instead of actually helping people on the ground.
I see.
And with all these different groups involved, with no clear way to track the money, it was almost impossible for donors to know where their contributions were going, what they were achieving.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating to think about.
It is.
But in all of this, it's important to remember that some areas have made progress.
Absolutely.
Bhaktapur, for example, Waze highlights it as a real success story in the rebuilding.
Bhaktapur is amazing, especially Durbar Square there. Those temples are back to how they were before the quakes. What's really interesting is how they got the funding.
How so?
They used tourist entry fees, they got local donations, and even contributions from people like David Ways through his website.
Okay.
So it was a really transparent system, very community-focused. You could actually sponsor the restoration of a specific temple, get a receipt, and they'd even put up a plaque with your name, like the Ninadapala Temple, Vatsala Durga, and the 55 Window Palace. Those were all restored this way, so you could see exactly where your money was going.
That's great. Makes a big difference, I bet.
It does.
And Patan, Ways also mentions Patan as an area that's recovered pretty well.
Yeah, Bhutan's come a long way, especially with its key heritage sites, like the Krishna Mandir and the Golden Temple.
Right.
There's this group called the Kathmandu Valley Preservation Trust. They've been instrumental working with local artisans to restore the incredible craftsmanship of Patan Durbar Square. You still see scaffolding, so the work isn't finished, but tourists and worshippers are coming back in large numbers.
That's good to hear.
It is.
So we see this variety in the recovery, right? You have Bhaktapur and Patan doing really well, but then you have places like Bungamadi, which Ways describes as being really delayed, still struggling.
Yeah, Bungamadi is heartbreaking. This old newer town was hit hard in 2015. Hundreds of homes destroyed, major temples like Manakamadi just gone. 10 years later, the rebuilding is happening, but so slowly. Lots of families still live in makeshift shelters. There's this sense that the billions promised haven't really reached them. The NRA says a lot of private homes have been rebuilt across Nepal, but Bungamadi tells a different story.
How so?
Well, they gave out these grants, $3,000 per household, but often that wasn't even close to enough to cover basic construction.
Oh, wow.
So it shows you how hard it is to have a one-size-fits-all aid program. Different places have different needs.
Right, right. And what about Kathmandu itself? I mean, as the capital, it must have gotten a lot of attention and aid, right?
Yeah, Kathmandu's a mixed bag.
Okay.
Some key sites in Durbar Square have been restored and reopened, like Kasamandap, historically super important,
Yeah.
and the Trailokya Mohan Narayan Temple. But other parts, like sections of the Hanumandoka Palace, they're still damaged, and there's scaffolding everywhere.
It must be strange walking around Kathmandu.
It is. Life moves so fast there, it's easy to forget that under the surface, things are not fully healed.
And Ways also talks about more rural areas, right? Places further out from Kathmandu.
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
Like Sintupalchak, Makwanpur. There are families still in temporary shelters, kids going to school in tents. It's a reminder that the effects of the quakes are long-lasting and not evenly distributed.
It's really sobering.
It is.
Ways also draws this really interesting comparison, maybe a bit concerning, to the recent earthquake in Myanmar.
Right, the one near Mandalay in March 2025, magnitude 7.7. It was big.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that the international aid response was quite different than what Nepal got in 2015. Like, the U.S. only pledged $2 million to Myanmar.
$2 million, compared to $130 million for Nepal.
Exactly.
That's a huge difference. What do you think explains that?
I think a few things. Myanmar's political situation is a big factor. You have the military junta in power since the 2021 coup.
Right.
So countries like the U.S. might be hesitant to give money directly to the government. Plus, there's a possibility of donor fatigue.
Donor fatigue.
Yeah, maybe after a while, countries are less willing to give as much as they did before. And priorities shift. Like the Trump administration cut USA funding, so that probably plays a role too.
Like almost like the world has moved on, in a way.
In a way, yeah. And that's something to think about for Nepal, you know. What if another big quake hits? Will the world respond the same way it did in 2015?
It's a big question.
It is.
And then there's Ways' own personal story, how the earthquakes changed his own work and priorities. It really hit him hard.
Oh, absolutely. He talks about how he was hesitant before to fully commit to documenting Nepal's heritage, but the quakes made him realize how important it was. Seeing those ancient buildings destroyed, sometimes with no proper records for rebuilding, it was a wake-up call. He tells this story of standing by the Vatsala Durga Temple in Bhaktapur right before the quake, thinking about this very thing, the need to document everything. And after the quakes hit, his first instinct was to document the destruction through his website. Then he worked with the Digital Archaeology Institute, making 3D maps of the damaged temples.
3D maps.
Yeah. And that work led him to start his own organization, the Digital Archaeology Foundation. It's all about preserving these sites digitally.
It's incredible work.
It is, and it went further than that. One of the biggest things he did was create that guidebook, Kathmandu Valley Heritage Walks.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
These 28 walking tours through all the heritage sites in the valley. It's like a record of what was there before and during reconstruction.
That's amazing.
And the digital version is constantly updated to reflect the progress. He also noticed that there was no system for finding missing trekkers, which is a huge problem in Nepal's mountains. So he started missingtrekker.com. And he was constantly fighting misinformation in the media, providing accurate updates for tourists.
There has been quite a task.
It was. He was really dedicated to it.
It's clear that the earthquakes changed him, led him to make these really important contributions to Nepal.
Yeah. He also talks about his experience with donations, and it's interesting. At first, he listed all these big international aid organizations on his website as good places to donate. But being on the ground, he saw that some were inefficient, had high overhead costs, weren't transparent about how they used the money.
Oh, wow.
And he contrasted that with local individuals, community groups, who were doing amazing work directly helping people. So he realized that in the future, he'd rather help people donate to individuals and local organizations.
It's a different approach.
It is.
But it seems like it could be more effective.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Less bureaucracy, more accountability. And he also talks about the personal loss he felt, losing friends, seeing places he loved destroyed. It was a tough time.
It's hard to even imagine.
It is.
And then there's the question of the future. Ways talks about Nepal's position with its neighbors, India and China, and the threat of future earthquakes, which are basically inevitable.
Yeah, he emphasizes that the recovery's been uneven. Bhaktapur is a success, but Bungamadi's struggling, Kathmandu's in between. And he points out that there isn't a lot of public discussion in Nepal about the fact that more earthquakes are going to happen.
It's understandable, I guess. No one wants to think about that.
I get it, but it's important. And he connects that to the earthquake in Myanmar. It didn't get much media coverage, maybe because it was too close to home for Nepal, brought back too many bad memories.
Makes sense.
And globally, things are shifting. Western countries like the U.S. might not be as willing or able to provide the same level of aid as they did in 2015.
Right.
So India and China, they're becoming more influential in the region. And future aid, it might be more about geopolitics than pure humanitarianism.
Yeah.
China's Belt and Road Initiative, the border disputes with India, all that comes into play. But then he brings it back to Bhaktapur. That's the model, he says. Local, transparent, community-driven. And he stresses that donors need to demand accountability, transparency from everyone involved in aid. And of course, he's continuing his work documenting Nepal's heritage.
It's a complex situation.
It is
a mix of hope and struggle, really. But I think it's inspiring to see the resilience of the Nepalese people and the dedication of people like David Weiss to preserving their culture.
Absolutely.
So for our listeners, if you want to learn more about Nepal's heritage and what's happening on the ground, I really recommend checking out David Weiss' work. His website is called The Longest Way Home Nepal Travel website. You can find it online pretty easily.
It's great. Lots of information on there.
He also has a general guidebook for Nepal and another one specifically about Kathmandu Valley called Kathmandu Valley Heritage Walks. If you want to really explore the area, those books are fantastic.
Absolutely.
So that's it for this somewhat somber anniversary episode. It's been 10 years since the earthquakes hit Nepal.
A long time.
It has. But as we've seen, the recovery is ongoing. And it's a story of challenges, but also resilience and hope. And hopefully Nepal is ready for whatever the future holds, given how much the world has changed in just these past 10 years.
Let's hope so.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.